The doorbell rang at exactly 9:47 p.m., cutting through the October silence like a blade. General Robert Harrison knew who it was before he opened the door. For 6 months, he'd been dreading this moment when the lies would finally catch up with him. The woman standing on his porch held an envelope in trembling hands, and inside was the one thing that could destroy his 25-year career: her husband's final message. Sergeant Miller had been dead for 6 months, officially killed in a training accident. But Sarah Miller knew the truth, and tonight, for the first time in his distinguished military career, General Harrison would cry in front of his wife. Welcome to the Silent Service Stories. If stories of courage, sacrifice, and the weight of command move you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These stories matter, and they deserve to be told. The autumn air carried the scent of pine needles and distant wood smoke across Fort Bragg's sprawling 163,000 acres. As the largest military installation in the world by population, it housed the dreams and nightmares of America's finest warriors. But on this particular Thursday evening, only one nightmare mattered to General Robert Harrison. He sat alone in his corner office on the 4th floor of the main command building, watching shadows stretch across parade grounds where thousands of soldiers had marched toward their destinies. At 52, Harrison commanded respect that had been earned through blood, sweat, and decisions that would haunt lesser men. The Medal of Honor gleamed at the center of his chest, flanked by the Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, and Purple Heart. Each piece of metal told a story of moments when his leadership had meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. But tonight, those decorations felt heavier than usual. A red folder sat at the corner of his mahogany desk, its classification marking reading Operation Blackout, Top Secret /SCI. Those words had been stealing his sleep for 6 months, ever since 8 of America's finest soldiers had died in what their families were told was a training accident at Fort Bragg. The truth was infinitely more complicated. Harrison pulled the folder closer, though he could recite its contents from memory. Operation Blackout had been a targeted elimination mission against Abu Hassan, ISIS's financial architect. Intelligence reports indicated Hassan would be meeting with cell leaders at a compound outside Aleppo, Syria. The target was too valuable to ignore. Hassan's network channeled millions of dollars to terrorist operations worldwide, and his elimination could cripple ISIS funding for years. But intelligence in the middle of a civil war is never certain. The mission brief had spelled out the harsh mathematics of modern warfare: probability of success, 60%, acceptable loss threshold, 40%. For Harrison, approving Operation Blackout meant accepting that some soldiers under his command might not return home. The team he'd selected represented Fort Bragg's absolute best. Alpha Team was led by Sergeant James Miller, a 28-year-old veteran of 3 Afghanistan deployments who'd earned his Green Beret through tactical brilliance and unshakable calm under fire. His roster included Corporal David Chen, a combat medic whose quick thinking had saved dozens of lives, Specialist Maria Rodriguez, a communications expert fluent in Arabic, and Private First Class Kevin O'Brien, barely 22, but already showing special operations potential that impressed even seasoned veterans. Bravo Team was commanded by Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, whose sniper skills were legendary even among Special Forces circles. His team included Sergeant Lisa Thompson, an explosives expert who could disarm IEDs blindfolded, Corporal Ryan Jackson, whose human intelligence gathering was unmatched, and Specialist Anthony Garcia, whose precision in close quarters combat was extraordinary. 8 soldiers, 8 of the finest warriors America had ever produced, and General Harrison had sent them into a trap. The operation had gone catastrophically wrong from the moment boots hit Syrian soil. The intelligence had been fatally flawed, not through incompetence, but through enemy deception. Hassan wasn't at the compound, and what appeared to be a routine meeting was actually an elaborate ambush. The terrorist network had been feeding false information to American intelligence assets for months, and Operation Blackout was the culmination of their deadly deception. Alpha and Bravo teams found themselves surrounded by more than 50 enemy fighters in a compound designed specifically to be a killing field. The classified after-action reports painted a picture of exceptional bravery against overwhelming odds. For nearly 4 hours, 8 American soldiers held off an enemy force 6 times their size while calling for air support that couldn't reach them due to surface-to-air missile threats. But what made their sacrifice truly heroic was a discovery that changed everything. When the teams realized they'd walked into a trap, they found 12 civilian hostages being held in the compound's lower level, aid workers, journalists, and local interpreters who had been captured during previous operations. Instead of immediately extracting to save their own lives, they chose to rescue those innocents first. The final radio transmission came from Sergeant Miller at 0347 hours, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. Control, this is Alpha Leader. Civilians are secure and clear of the compound. We're taking heavy fire from all directions. Estimate 50+ enemy fighters. We've done our job. Those people are going home to their families. If we don't make it out, tell my wife I love her. Tell her Emma should be proud of her daddy. Tell her this wasn't for nothing. Alpha Leader out. 3 minutes later, the compound exploded in a fireball visible from orbit. Hassan's fighters had chosen martyrdom over capture, detonating enough explosives to level the entire structure. When Delta Force recovery teams reached the site 18 hours later, they found only rubble and scattered remains. All 8 Americans were listed as killed in action, but their deaths presented General Harrison with an agonizing dilemma. Operation Blackout was part of a classified program that officially didn't exist. Acknowledging American forces were conducting targeted elimination missions inside Syria would create a diplomatic crisis that could destabilize the entire region and compromise ongoing operations protecting American lives. Harrison made the hardest decision of his career. The families would be told their soldiers had died in a training accident at Fort Bragg. The deaths would be ruled accidental, and the truth would remain buried in classified files that few would ever see. For 6 months, Harrison had lived with that lie. He'd stood at attention during 8 military funerals, looked into the eyes of widows and children, and told them their heroes had died during routine training exercises. He'd signed condolence letters, authorized death benefits, and maintained the fiction that these warriors had simply been unlucky during a normal day at Fort Bragg. But secrets have a way of demanding payment, and on this October evening, Harrison's debt was about to come due. At 9:47 p.m., the doorbell of his modest off-base home rang with the persistence of someone who wouldn't be ignored. Harrison was in his den with his wife Margaret, watching the evening news and trying to pretend that retirement planning occupied his thoughts instead of classified operation reports that haunted his dreams. When he opened the door, Sarah Miller stood on his front porch, her face set with the determination that comes from months of unanswered questions. At 32, she possessed the same quiet strength that had attracted her husband, a resilience forged by years of military life and the knowledge that every goodbye might be the last. "General Harrison," she said, her voice steady despite tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, "I have James's final message. We need to talk, now." Harrison felt his heart rate spike, the familiar adrenaline surge he'd experienced in combat zones around the world. "Sarah, this is quite late. Perhaps we could schedule something in my office tomorrow." "No," Sarah interrupted, producing an envelope from her purse. "Right now. This has been killing me for 6 months. I know where James really died, and I know you've been lying to all of us." The general glanced back at Margaret, who was watching from the doorway with growing concern. In 25 years of marriage, she'd never seen the expression of fear now written across her husband's face. "Margaret, honey, why don't you head upstairs?" Harrison said quietly, his command voice cracking slightly. In the living room, surrounded by family photos and the comfortable remnants of a military family's life, Sarah opened the envelope with hands that trembled only slightly. Inside was a handwritten letter on standard military stationery, the kind soldiers use when they want to make sure their words outlive their bodies. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began in James's careful block printing. "If you're reading this, I'm probably not coming home from this one. There's something I couldn't tell you before we left, something that's been eating at me since we got the briefing. This isn't a training exercise like I told you. We're going operational, and the target is real." Harrison's mouth went dry as Sarah continued reading aloud. "Location: Syrian border, approximately 15 clicks northwest of Aleppo. Mission: high-value target elimination. General Harrison knows every detail of what we're walking into, including the probability that some of us won't make it back. He's a good man, Sarah, but he's carrying the weight of this decision, and I can see it in his eyes." Sarah paused, looking up at Harrison with a mixture of pain and accusation. "Keep reading," she said softly. If something happens to me, I need you to know the truth. We're not training casualties. We're warriors, and we knew the risks going in. The families deserve to know we died doing what we swore to do, protecting innocent people who can't protect themselves. I love you and Emma more than words can express. Take care of our baby girl and tell her Daddy was proud to serve alongside the finest soldiers America ever produced. The letter concluded with words that hit Harrison like physical blows. Sarah, make sure the truth comes out. We deserve that much. The families deserve that much. Don't let our sacrifice be buried in lies. Forever yours, James. Harrison's hands shook as he read the letter, each word hitting him like shrapnel. The careful military language couldn't disguise the fear of a soldier heading into an operation he suspected he might not survive, or the love of a husband and father who wanted his family to understand why he'd made the ultimate sacrifice. You lied to me, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You lied to all of us. James died in Syria, not Fort Bragg, and you knew there was a good chance it would happen, didn't you? Harrison looked up from the letter, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. This was the moment every commanding officer dreads, when the weight of command collides with the human cost of military operations, when the mathematics of warfare meets the mathematics of grief. Sarah, he began, then stopped. How do you explain the impossible calculus of modern warfare to a woman whose husband paid the ultimate price for your decisions? Try me, Sarah said, echoing her husband's direct communication style. I'm a military wife. I understand operational security, but I also understand when someone is lying to my face. Why did my husband die? I want the truth, all of it. Harrison took a deep breath and began to dismantle 6 months of carefully constructed lies. James was right about everything, he said slowly. It wasn't training. It was a classified operation targeting Abu Hassan, a high-value financial coordinator for ISIS. Our intelligence sources indicated he would be at a compound outside Aleppo, meeting with cell leaders to coordinate funding for attacks on European targets. Who is Abu Hassan? Sarah asked, her journalist's instincts taking over despite her emotional state. He was ISIS's financial architect, Harrison explained. The man responsible for channeling millions of dollars to terrorist operations worldwide. Taking him out would have crippled their ability to fund attacks for years, potentially saving thousands of innocent lives. Sarah listened intently, but the anger in her eyes was growing brighter with each revelation. So you sent 8 soldiers after one man? It's never that simple, Harrison said, moving to the window where he could see the distant lights of Fort Bragg. Hassan was heavily protected, and the compound was essentially a fortress. We needed soldiers capable of precision strikes in urban terrain while minimizing civilian casualties. Your husband's team was the best we had, but something went wrong. Everything went wrong, Harrison admitted, his voice heavy with 6 months of accumulated guilt. The intelligence was compromised. Hassan wasn't there. The whole thing was a setup. Our people walked into an ambush designed specifically to kill American Special Operations Forces. And you sent them anyway. I sent them based on the best intelligence available, Harrison said, turning back to face Sarah. But you're right. I signed the order. I approved the mission. 8 soldiers died because of my decision, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Why didn't you tell the families the truth? It was the question Harrison had been dreading for 6 months, the one that woke him up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats. Because revealing Operation Blackout would have exposed classified programs that protect American lives every day, he said. Because confirming our presence in Syria would have endangered ongoing operations and diplomatic relationships that keep this country safe. Because ... Because their lives were worth less than your secrets. The accusation hung in the air like battlefield smoke, cutting through every justification Harrison had constructed over the past 6 months. Sarah, he said, his voice breaking slightly, I'm a soldier. I've worn this uniform for 25 years. Sometimes you have to make decisions that will haunt you forever, decisions that cost you pieces of your soul, but you make them because the alternative is worse. James had a daughter, Sarah said, standing up with sudden energy. Emma is 8 years old. Every night she asks me how Daddy died, and I tell her what you told me, that it was an accident during training. How do I explain to her that her father was a hero who died protecting innocent people when you've spent 6 months lying about it? Harrison walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder marked with security classifications Sarah had no clearance to see. But at this point, regulations seemed less important than truth. This is the real after-action report, he said, handing her the classified documents. James and his team weren't just trying to eliminate a terrorist. When they realized they'd walked into a trap, they could have extracted immediately and probably saved their own lives. Instead, they chose to rescue 12 civilian hostages being held in the compound's lower level. Aid workers, journalists, local interpreters, people with families who were waiting for them to come home. Sarah took the folder with trembling hands, scanning pages of operational details that painted a picture of extraordinary heroism under impossible circumstances. "What was James's final transmission?" she asked. Harrison pulled out the official transcript of all radio communications from that night and read aloud, his voice steady despite the tears forming in his eyes. "Control, this is Alpha Leader. Civilians are secure and clear of the compound. We're taking heavy fire from all directions. Estimate 50+ enemy fighters. We've done our job. Those people are going home to their families. If we don't make it out, tell my wife I love her. Tell her Emma should be proud of her daddy. Tell her this wasn't for nothing. Alpha Leader out." Sarah began to cry, but these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pride mixed with rage that 6 months of lies had denied her the right to properly honor her husband's sacrifice. "So what happens now?" she asked. Harrison closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 25 years of service pressing down on his shoulders. "I don't know, Sarah. I've been carrying this secret for 6 months, and it's been destroying me piece by piece. Every night I see their faces. Every morning I wake up knowing that 8 families are living a lie. Do the other families know? No. You're the first person outside the classified community to learn the truth." Sarah stood up, her decision already made. "General, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Tell the other families the truth. All of them. They deserve to know how their loved ones really died." Harrison nodded slowly, understanding the magnitude of what she was asking. "That will end my career. Court-martial, possible prison time, loss of pension and benefits. Everything I've worked for over 25 years will be gone." Sarah met his gaze with the same unwavering determination her husband had shown in his final moments. "But you'll finally be able to sleep at night, and 8 families will know their loved ones died as heroes, not as victims of a training accident." "Yes," Harrison said quietly. "You're right. It's time to do what's right, regardless of the cost." That night, after Sarah left with promises to contact the other families, General Harrison climbed the stairs to his bedroom, where Margaret was pretending to sleep. He sat in the chair beside their bed, still wearing his uniform, and for the first time in 25 years of military service, he wept, not just for the 8 soldiers he'd lost, but for the man he'd become in the aftermath of their deaths. Margaret stirred and sat up, immediately moving to comfort her husband of 25 years. "Robert, what's wrong?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "I failed them, Maggie," he whispered. "I failed them all, and now their families know it." The next morning, General Harrison arrived at his office to find his deputy, Colonel Patricia Hayes, waiting with a grim expression that spoke of crisis management and damage control. "Sir," she said, "we have a situation. The families are here." "How many?" "All 8 families, sir. Widows, parents, children. They're in the main briefing room." Sarah Miller told them everything. Harrison straightened his uniform and looked out at Fort Bragg's parade grounds, where young soldiers were conducting morning physical training under the Carolina sun. In a few minutes, he would tell those families the truth about Operation Blackout, and his career would be over. "Colonel," he said, "get me a secure line to the Pentagon. I need to speak with General Mackenzie." "Sir?" "It's time for the truth, Patricia. Those families deserve to know how their soldiers really died, and I'm going to tell them everything." When General Harrison entered the briefing room, he saw 8 families whose lives had been shattered, not just by loss, but by 6 months of official lies. Sarah Miller sat in the front row, flanked by the other widows. Behind them, parents clutched photographs of sons and daughters who would never age another day. Children who would grow up without fathers and mothers sat quietly, too young to understand the proceedings, but old enough to sense the gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Harrison began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. 6 months ago, I told you that your loved ones died in a training accident here at Fort Bragg. That was not true. The silence was absolute. Your husbands, your sons and daughters died in Syria during a classified operation called Blackout. They were conducting a targeted elimination mission against a high-value terrorist target, and I was the officer who sent them into harm's way. Maria Rodriguez's mother stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "Why did you lie to us?" Harrison met her gaze directly. "Because I was afraid, not of national security implications or diplomatic consequences, but of this moment, of looking into your eyes and admitting that I failed them." For the next 2 hours, General Harrison told them everything: the mission objectives, the intelligence failures, the ambush, and most importantly, the heroic decision to rescue 12 innocent civilians before attempting their own extraction. He read them their loved ones' final transmissions, showed them classified photos of the people their family members had died to save, and answered every question with brutal honesty. When he finished, Kevin O'Brien's father approached the podium. The older man had served 2 tours in Vietnam and understood the weight of command decisions. "General," he said, "thank you for finally telling us the truth. My boy died a hero, and that's all that matters now. Can you forgive me?" Harrison asked. The old soldier nodded slowly. "Son, Forgiveness isn't mine to give, but respect is, and you've earned it by having the courage to tell us what we needed to hear. The following week, General Harrison was called to the Pentagon. Court-martial proceedings were initiated, but something unexpected happened. The 8 families submitted a collective petition, not for his prosecution, but for military reform. They wanted changes to ensure other families wouldn't endure months of lies while grieving their heroes. The media attention was intense, but respectful. The families controlled the narrative, emphasizing their loved one's heroism rather than the cover-up. Editorial boards called for transparency reform. Veterans organizations rallied around both the families and Harrison, recognizing the impossible position modern warfare placed commanders in. 6 months later, General Harrison took early retirement rather than face a court-martial that would have divided the military and reopened wounds the families wanted to see healed. But before leaving Fort Bragg, he oversaw the construction of a memorial in the base's center. 8 names were engraved in black granite, along with the truth. They died protecting innocent lives in Operation Blackout Syria, 2023. Below that, an inscription Harrison had written himself. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Today, General Harrison lives quietly in Virginia, working with Gold Star families and advising the Pentagon on how to communicate the realities of classified operations to bereaved families. The work doesn't pay much, but it pays in ways that matter. In the gratitude of families who finally understand their loved ones' sacrifices, in policy changes that prevent future cover-ups, in the slow healing of his own conscience. Every year on the anniversary of Operation Blackout, he visits Fort Bragg to stand before that memorial. Young soldiers often approach, asking about the names carved in granite. Harrison tells them the story, all of it, because these warriors deserve to be remembered not as casualties of a training accident, but as heroes who chose to save innocent lives even when it meant sacrificing their own. Sarah Miller now serves as president of the Gold Star Wives organization, working alongside Harrison to ensure military families receive the truth they deserve, even when that truth is painful. Her daughter Emma, now 14, knows exactly how her father died and why it mattered. This story isn't just about a general's guilt or a widow's quest for truth. It's about the price of secrecy in a democracy, about the weight of command, and about the courage it takes to choose truth over career. General Harrison lost his 25-year military career, his pension, and his place in the military hierarchy he'd spent decades climbing. But he saved something more valuable, the legacy of 8 American heroes who deserve to be remembered for what they really were, warriors who chose to save innocent lives even when it meant sacrificing their own. In the end, real leadership isn't about making perfect decisions under impossible circumstances. It's about owning your mistakes, accepting the consequences no matter how devastating, and finding the courage to do what's right when everything is on the line. James Miller, David Chen, Maria Rodriguez, Kevin O'Brien, Marcus Williams, Lisa Thompson, Ryan Jackson, and Anthony Garcia are no longer buried in classified files or remembered as victims of a training accident. Their names stand in the center of Fort Bragg, where every soldier can see them and understand what true courage looks like, not just in battle, but in choosing truth over convenience, honor over self-preservation. Every day, new soldiers pass that memorial and learn a lesson no military manual can teach. That honor isn't just about following orders or completing missions. It's about having the courage to tell the truth, even when that truth costs you everything you've worked for. Because some sacrifices are too sacred to be buried in lies, and some stories are too important to remain classified forever. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that behind every military operation are real families paying real prices, please subscribe to the Silent Service Stories. We tell the stories that matter, the ones about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about the price of freedom, and about the heroes who pay that price in silence. Because in the end, truth is the only tribute worthy of those who gave everything.